So I think we're all assembled. Thank you all for coming again and having faith in this adventure. And the herons were here for 40 years, which is a long time for a heronry to be in existence, because in putting their nests on spruce trees, sometimes 5 nests to 1 tree, they gird the trees, their guano is so acid, it kills the trees, and so they kill the thing that brought them there in the first place, and so they move on. And usually that takes 15 or 20 years, and they were here because there were so many trees available, they just changed their location for 40 years. But they're not here now, and you see the occasional heron. Has anybody seen a heron this year? Okay. And I don't know where they are. I think they're up towards Donnell Pond or something.
My husband saw one on the Pumpkinville Road the other day, and I don't know what it was doing. It was standing over the culvert by Smelt Brook, which is completely dry now. And he thought it might be a juvenile, not knowing where it should be.
They are hatched in the middle of August, the young, and so a young heron looks tender and smaller and neat and clean and tidy. You can oftentimes tell them from the worn and tired old elder. Yeah.
Today, I live in Great Pond, Aurora, which is inland, and I went with my dog just for a walk, and there was a juvenile, some type of heron, at a little sardine.
They eat frogs and anything they can get.
Yeah.
And even when they lived on Bering Island, they would go to Great Pond. They would just take up and go for a range of 25 miles to bring food back.
I was amazed to see one there.
Okay, so the video is on, it's looking at that, and so I'm going to just show you about great blue heron. This is a juvenile heron. It has a kind of a youthful teenage look about it. It's kind of lean, and maybe that's just a practiced eye, I don't know. And this is on one of its first flights out of the nest, down to the shore, and then they don't feed themselves, they don't know how to do that. They go back to the nest and get fed by mom and dad. And they push that one as long as they can, but eventually the parents refuse to feed them. So let's go on and consider the herons of Taunton Bay. So there they are, poised gracefully on the tops of trees or on the seashore, or flying through the air. There could have been 250 herons on the island in its heyday, so you couldn't come up here without seeing them. They were either feeding on the shore or flying. And they're a very industrious, busy bird, because with 5 young per nest, 2 adults have to feed 5 very ravenous young. They have to work very hard to feed everybody, and so they will grow. That was a typical sight. You couldn't tell what that is. It's just a lump on legs. They can compact their bodies and hunker down. And that's where we like to see herons gliding gracefully through the air. I saw one old eagle, elder eagle, teaching a young one how to avoid an eagle. And it flew along and it looked just like that, the 2 of them. But what it did is when an eagle got too close from the rear, it upended its wings like this, spilled the air out, and it plummeted 30 feet down and ended up heading the opposite direction. And eagles can't do that. Eagles can't fold their wings. They can only glide in the same level. So, and I've seen them use that against eagles. It's their one protection, but it implies that there's a safe distance between them and the ground that they can do that. They have enough maneuvering room, because if they're too close, the eagle is sure to win out. I took lots of pictures like that, looking for the perfect picture, and you have to see them all because they're all great. And here my shutter wasn't fast enough to freeze the frame so you get the blur, and so many times you get the blur. But that's nice too. It kind of is the way things are. They're always in motion. I like that. That's the spirit, the ghostly spirit of the heron. So they appear in all manner of guises, and that's why it's fun to see them, because no two times are they at the same angle or the same height from you. They perch on the top of the trees. I don't know why they do that, but they get a good vantage point. They wade to catch little tiny fish, little striped killifish that are about 2.5, 3 inches long. And they just walk very slowly. And, they lift their legs very carefully and don't make a lot of ruckus, so not to disturb. And then they suddenly dart out with this long neck, dive down and get, or miss it. This shows they live in quite a condominium. There's not much space between the nests there. And you get 5 birds here and 5 birds here. And the interesting thing to me was when these guys are being fed by the adults, these guys pay no attention whatsoever. They only respond to the incoming adult. And the incoming adult will go rock once as it moves in to let them know they're coming. And one nest will respond to that and get all keyed up. And they can tell the difference. And it all sounds the same to me, but it individual to each of them. And there were 200 nests, that's 200 different rocks. And they could tell each one, or at least they could tell if it was theirs or not. That's an unflattering view of a heron for me as I'm going to the spring to get water, but it shows how close they were. And this one turned around, looked at me with one eye, looked at me with the other eye, looked at me with both eyes, trying to figure out what I was, was I a threat or not. But at that point I walked on and it stayed there, and there was peace between us. They love sumac wood because it is very light, but also very strong. And it's what they like to build their nests out of. So there was, at that time, a sumac patch, and here is a female heron gathering sticks from that have fallen off the sumac onto the ground. And you can see this one is kind of worn, it's shop worn. It's an older bird. It's frayed from wear and tear because it flew up just a short time ago from the Southland. It follows the frost line, just like harbor seals come at the same time, and they arrive on April 1st is when they show up. And then they build their nest, and then they lay their eggs, and then they sit on their eggs almost immediately. It takes no time. And that's when in its breeding plumage you can see these feathers on the back of the head that come out. Really beautiful. And coloration of the bill. And this won't win any design contest for the nest. It's not neat and tidy. It's just a bundle of sticks. So that just shows cheek by jowl. The colony is all in the trees, and they dominate for acres and acres, just like that. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 herons in one picture from at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 nests. So here's the adult come into the lower nest to feed this nest. And these guys look down, but they are not excited because they know they're not part of the show. This is not for them. And so they just witness what's going on. And vice versa, it works the other way around. So what's really surprising to me is this adult coming in has a gullet gorged with food, but it does not feed them. It stands like that and makes the young reach up, grab their neck or their bill, and pull it down to feed themselves. So the most aggressive get the most food. And it starts, with the first feeding. So the parents have the determination and the will to not feed them. So that's a typical posture. These guys are out of it, and these guys have to say, well, she's not making it happen, so we have to make it happen. And the most aggressive of them will reach up, grab the bill, and you see, actually grab the bill of the mother, and then they bend the neck down, and she regurgitates, and then they eat. Dinner is on. So here they've bent her head down. She doesn't say, soup's on, she makes them do it. And then as soon as she does it, she resumes that posture, because there's probably a little left in her throat, and they have to do it all over again. So that's how little guys are challenged. Well, if she won't feed us, we'll make her feed us. And that favors birds who get ahead. They're up there. How did they learn to fly from a nest? Well, this is what they do. Is they go out, stand on the edge of the nest, and flap into the breeze, and just slowly build up some kind of muscle tone in their muscles. And if they don't, their first flight is really going to be a disaster. Here, 4 of the young have left, and they're leaving the last one who is hesitant about leaving. And then that's what and they all leave in the middle of August, so on the 20th of August, that's what it looks like. And that's when I can go in and count the nests to see how many there actually were, which is a thankless task because it's really hard going under all those nests to find out how many. So here's the maiden flight of a heron, and it looks awkward. You notice the feet, which in an adult are always tidily folded together, are spread wide, the tail is spread, and its wings don't even look quite right. And its neck is out, it's not folded its neck back. But wait till you see the next one. That's it, coming in for its first landing. How do you stop this thing? Where are the brakes? And so it just stretches every muscle it has, and that creates drag. And what it's aiming is to land in this tree because they have to have a target. And I was very fortunate. This bird came around and came like that. Then, this is where they go. The young herons, without knowing how to feed themselves or why they're there, go to the nearest shore, mill around, trade gossip or something. Here's the first time they get together with young herons from other nests. So they shoot the breeze a little bit, and then they fly back and ask the elders to feed them. And you see, kind of awkward looking, stiff, but becoming a heron. And suddenly the bay in mid-August is flooded with herons. They're on every shore. They just go all around. I was in my uncle's study, which is a funny observatory-looking place on Varying Island on the cliffs on the west side. And I was just sitting in there, and 10 feet away, a heron landed in the tree. It didn't know I was there, so this is my opportunity to get close look at a heron. So puts one leg on the very top where it has to be at the top. It doesn't want to be any lesser. So it goes up, uses its wings to provide lift to step up to that branch, the top branch. And I expected it to fly off this way, so I was all ready for it. There it is, posing gracefully in my picture. But it flew off the other way, and that's my picture. It fooled me, and I'm always fooled. You have to be quick because he turned around, or she turned around, in the fraction of a second, and I just wasn't fast enough.
Do they always fly into the wind? That's what my son told me.
Most big birds find that's the only way to do it, but sometimes they can't do that. But generally speaking, I would say they fly into the wind, and the wind is a southwest wind in the summer typically. And so typically they take off facing that way. But it's not an absolute rule. That's one in Hog Bay on the mud flats that took off. And it's amazing how they can take off from wading in the water into the air without getting plunked down. That was the one that I showed you in my collection last week, where I waited for it to come up to me and I was hidden on the shore. And I think it saw me. I didn't think it flew because it saw me, but when it took off, I reached up and then it saw me. There is a great blue heron in the talons of a bald eagle. And that's what happens. It's easy for an eagle to pick off a heron. And in the eagle nesting season, they like to pick 2 a day out of the heron. And they would take the ones in the tallest, highest nest in the tree. And it happened every day. And you could hear the piteous squawks of that bird as it's going to be eaten alive. But then that's the way nature is. There's a food chain, and the eagle is the top predator, and the eagles are much lower down than the eagle. And so that's what happened. And finally, the eagle came and nested near its breakfast. It came to Bering Island, and so there was a heronry, and then on the edge of the heronry was a nest for eagles, so it didn't have to lug the heron so far. And that was the beginning of the end.
So it was predation, not that they ran out of trees or that they overpopulated the island.
Totally population depletion because of eagle sedation. And the population got down to 50 birds, 25 males, 25 females, and I don't know if I mentioned it on here, but I saw them in 1999. The day they arrived, I saw them come up the Taunton River, land with great relief on the spruce trees of Bering Island, and within 5 minutes an eagle was harassing them. They all flew up into the air, muddled, and then took off and never came back. They had had it. They just realized that, that was the end of that heron. And I think it was a wise move, and I think they then dispersed and didn't form a colony. I think they took shelter by individual nests. I'm not sure where they went, but people said they were on the stream Cardmill Brook that feeds out of Donnell Pond and goes into East Franklin. Some of them were seen nesting there. That's the first one. Now I think I will go on.